Where's the women in the house? They've been blessed with great minds. I could speak about my wife. She has a great mind. And she has a mind that she remembers everything. How many husbands know what I'm talking about? I know your wife's sitting next to you. You don't want to say nothing. It's okay. We'll talk after church. But the women have a blessed mind. They can remember details. Details. My wife is one that she can remember things that happened years ago. She'll remember the day, the time, and even what she was wearing and what everybody else was wearing. She'll even remember things that she read in a book, and she'll remember the book, the author, the page number where it was located. I said, thank God that I married her. God has blessed her with an awesome mind. So the mind can do remarkable things, but at the same time it can be limited. But when we compare our minds to the mind of God, thank God for the mind of God. See, we know our God is omnipresent. He is at all the places at the same time. He's omnipotent. He's all powerful. He's omniscient. He's all knowing at all times. See, the mind of God is an awesome thing. When we begin to think on how is it that God operates, you begin to become amazed at the awesomeness of our God. See, because his knowledge is absolute. It neither increases or decreases. It does not change. His knowledge cannot increase because he possesses all the knowledge at all times. How many know what I'm talking about? That's why our God is awesome. That's why when we look at what the psalmist had to say in Psalm 147 verse 5, he said, great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure. See, when we're talking about that phrase beyond measure, there are two words in Hebrew that translate the phrase beyond measure, and it's ayin and mespar. And together these words mean nothing in comparison, without number, innumerable, or unlimited. See, that describes the mind of our God. In other words, God's mind is infinite. Touch your neighbor, tell them God's mind is infinite. Infinite meaning without limits, unbounded, boundless. So the Bible tells us in 1 John chapter 3 verse 20, for whenever our heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart, and he knows everything. How many know that God knows everything? He knows everything. Have you ever stopped for a moment to think about how great and powerful our God is? Have you ever stopped for a moment just to think about how awesome God is? How big and powerful is the God that you and I serve? I need you to know this. The psalmist said it this way. He said, he counts the number of the stars. Not only does he do that, he gives them names to all of them. Great is our Lord and abundant in strength. His understanding is infinite. See, that is the greatness of our God. Our God that knows how many stars are out there. And not only that, he's able to name each and every one of them. How great and awesome our God is. When we look in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 10 verse 30, it tells us that even the very hairs of our head are all numbered. For some it's easier than others. But we're not going to go there tonight. But that is the awesomeness of our God. The fact that God knows every hair follicle that is on our head. That's the awesomeness of our God. He knows everything at all times. See, man has to think and we have to process. Well, God doesn't have to think because he already knows. He doesn't have to process. He doesn't need time. We thought that computers were awesome. Computers are just something simple of what the mind of God can do. He knows things at all times. And when the prophet Jeremiah received a calling from God, the Lord told him, before I formed you in your womb, in your mother's womb, I knew you. Do you know what that is? He's telling us, before you were conceived, I already knew who you were. Not only did I know who you were, I sanctified you and I ordained you as a prophet to the nations. See, that is an awesome God. Touch your neighbor and tell him, my God's awesome. My God is awesome. That's why the psalmist, knowing that God was an all-knowing God and that God knew everything that was happening all around, the psalmist had to say in Psalm 139, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely. How precious to me are your thoughts, oh God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. See, that is the awesomeness of our God. The power of the God that you and I serve. A God that is awesome. A God that is powerful. A God that knows how to do the right things. A God in other words, God is bad. Touch your neighbor and tell him, God is bad. God is bad. God knows what he's doing. God has an awesome mind. God is omniscient. He knows everything at all times. But you know what impacts me the most? Knowing how awesome our God is. How infinite his mind is. And yet in the midst of all that, God has got you on his mind. Are you hearing me? See, the psalmist could not understand this. The psalmist was saying, God, I don't understand this. You got to explain this to me. Because the psalmist was looking up and he was looking at creation, and he was looking at the sun, and he was looking at the moon and the stars and the mountains and all the creation, the beautiful creation that God had created. And he began to compare them to man, and he would say that there's something wrong here. Look how awesome these creatures are that have been created by God. And look at man that seems so small and so insignificant. And that's why at that point he had to ask God, or he had to say, what is man that you are mindful of him? See, I don't understand it. I look around me and we don't look like the moon, and the moon's able to shine in the midst of the darkness, but we're on his mind. See, we're not as bright, as big as the sun, but yet we're on his mind. We're not as complex and as large as the universe, but yet we're on his mind. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? See, we're not as beautiful as the blue sky, but yet we're on his mind. We're not as deep as the ocean floor, but yet we're on his mind. We're not as high as the tallest mountain all around us, but yet in the midst of that, God is saying, you're on my mind. Touch your neighbor and tell him, you're on his mind. You're on his mind. You're on his mind. See, because I need you to know how special you are. We're not just anybody. I need you to know how special you are. You are a special creation from God. See, the other things that God created were wonderful, were awesome, and it seems like compared to them, we are so insignificant. But look at what God did. When God was created everything, he created it, he spoke it, and it came to be. But when God created man, he didn't speak. God said, I'm going to take my time. Oh, you're not hearing me tonight. God said, I spoke